Okay, we're now recording. First episode, Kings of Indy. Hell yeah.
Let's do it.
So introduce yourself, Hayden.
I'm Hayden.
What's up?
Introduce yourself, Avery.
What's up? I'm Avery. We're both WWII students. Go Jags.
Hell yeah.
And we're going to talk about... We have no idea how to format this because we've never done a podcast before. So we have zero clue how to do this. But basically today we're going to talk about the first major offensive of the Second World War, because it starts the Second World War. Talking about the invasion of Poland. Hell yeah. Mm-hmm. On all sides. We're going to talk about the invasion of Poland from the German perspective, the Polish perspective, the Soviet perspective, and at some length the French perspective, because they invade Germany because of the invasion of Poland. But we'll get into that. So what we're going to talk about briefly, just a kind of an outline. We're going to go in order of kind of the events that lead up to the invasion of Poland, then the invasion itself, and then Hayden's going to, cover some individual battles, and then we'll kind of wrap it up with the end of the invasion, and then what kind of...
I'm the battle expert.
You are the battle expert, yes. And we'll wrap it up with the conclusion and kind of what's next in the war. So, drum roll, please. Without further ado, let's get started. So, where do we want to begin? So, basically, after the First World War, the maps of Europe are completely rewritten. So Germany loses a bunch of its territory. The nation of Poland is now created, because it's originally partly in Germany, or present-day Germany. It's originally in what is Russia, but now it kind of just is completely separated from the two nations, and now it becomes its own nation. And this is partly why Hitler will eventually take it, is because he has the concepts of Lebensraum, the idea of living space. The Germans are destined by God to kind of go into the East and take it over. But after World War I, the Germans are very upset that they lost a lot of their territory of what becomes Poland. And because Poland is in the East, they want to take it. So what do you have before the invasion of Poland? Because I know I have, at least in 1921, Poland begins a defensive alliance with France. And the treaty that France signs gives little protection when it comes to an invasion from the Soviet Union.
Is that the Kellogg-Briand?
I don't know what the name of it, but I know they signed a treaty for it.
Okay. Was it 1928?
21.
Oh, 21.
21. Yeah, like literally after World War I ends. But then the Poles begin mounting defenses on the Russian-Polish border, and it kind of deters a lot of Russian ideas of invasion. Because remember, Russia and Poland are actually in a war at this point. They're in a kind of a civil war. Mm-hmm. But that ends, and then that's kind of where it ends in terms of Polish, French, and English kind of negotiations until the 30s when Mustache Man comes into power. So what do you got?
Really, before that, what I have is a little bit about the Munich Agreement, mm-hmm. Which I think is definitely one of the big pieces of our discussion today, mm-hmm. Because it had a lot to do with appeasing Hitler and kind of trying to avoid another war.
Right.
I mean, the Great War, up until this time, was the biggest conflict in human history. And, I mean, clearly no one wanted to do that,
right.
Pacifist or not. And, I mean, they're trying to learn from their mistakes,
right.
Yeah. Which is fair. And when Hitler takes power, he speaks strongly for Germany, mm-hmm. and getting back the land that was taken from them. I mean, everyone and their mother is aware of the Treaty of Versailles, mm-hmm. and how it kind of screwed over the German people.
Right.
Which was a fair assessment. Germany was struggling at the time, and it didn't help that there was a worldwide depression that hit the early 30s.
I do want to add that, in the Treaty of Versailles, mm-hmm. and I kind of mentioned this before, but a lot of German land is taken over, and it becomes Poland, and partially some of German territory becomes like detached from the main German territory, this mm-hmm. the area of East Prussia, and that's what kind of mounts 20 years later when they invade Poland a much better offensive strategy, because now Poland is now completely surrounded on basically all sides.
The
Germans.
I will get into that. And I think what East Prussia really did for Germany, at least, and like Hitler's expansionist policy, was it gave him such a great excuse. I mean, and when you read about it, you completely understand what he's up against with this Polish corridor, they called it. Right. And I'll get into that a lot more in the battles that ensued there.
Right.
But, you know, you have this chunk of land separating.
It's like it's like 15 miles across, and then you're back into Germany, basically. It's so small. You can, in theory, justify, well, come on, let's put this back into Germany. And actually, Hitler does, like, kind of want this. He wants to build, like, a railroad across and go into Danzig.
Yep.
And then go into East Prussia, and that's kind of one thing that the Poles are really kind of iffy about. They're like, oh, I don't know, Hitler, but... Yeah, so what were you saying?
You're exactly right. He was trying to create at least a path between those two sides, and which
makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. It makes complete sense. It's logical on every level. At that point in time, like, there's no use in fearing Hitler, right?
But to be fair, there is definitely a deeper meaning to why Hitler wants to do that.
Oh, yeah.
It's not all it seems. But.
I mean, that gives him access to the East, where you have all these other countries in Eastern Europe, too. And, but I think at this point, like, the whole of Europe and even the world, if you will, kind of understood what Hitler was getting at, which is why you see this appeasement strategy offered in the Munich Agreement. And I think that's the best place we can start off for the invasion of Poland, if you want to get into that.
Yeah, so, I mean, you have more about the Munich Agreement than probably I do. So if you want to take it, you can. Please be my guest, and I'll add where I can.
My knowledge on the Munich Agreement is not huge, but I will tell you that it was groundbreaking for all of Europe and kind of setting the stage for the war. Neville Chamberlain was the leader, the PM of
United Kingdom,
Great Britain, UK, and he was completely on board with the policy, and him being on board of on the policy of appeasement
gave it so much more legitimacy.
Exactly, it meant everything, and funny enough, a lot of British people felt this way.
Right.
You know, like, this was not an unpopular opinion. No one questioned this policy. So Hitler is asking for basically a lot of the land lost through the Treaty of Versailles.
Yeah, he wants part of what's called the Sudetenland. He wants all the Sudeten Germans, which I think are extinct now. I don't think it's actually like an actual ethnicity anymore.
Right.
But part of parts of Czechoslovakia are basically like inhabited by these German-speaking people, and Hitler wants to, because this is after the Anschluss, this is after Austria has been annexed into the Reich. He now wants to have some of Czechoslovakia, and then France, UK, Italy as well is at the table for this discussion. I don't think Soviet Union was at the discussion, was it?
No, it was not.
Just the Western powers.
They, so Germany, I found this really ironic. I was having a discussion earlier today, actually, about it. Communism sits on the far left of the political spectrum, whereas authoritarianism or fascism...
Far right.
Yeah, far right. But in practice, what we've seen is they kind of take a similar form. You know, you got this figurehead who's the leader, and this is not against anyone who's, you know, for communism, fascism. If you can put it into words and explain it to me in a way that works, good job. You know what I mean? Like, more power to you. I get it. You know, I'm not going to stand in the way of anyone's beliefs. But in practice, what we've seen, especially at this time in the world, was you kind of have this authoritarian on both sides.
Right.
As the head. And, but funny enough, it's far left and far right, so they greatly opposed each other and their style of governance. And so the Soviet Union was not going to be involved with the Munich conference at all. And that had everything to do with Germany. Germany did not want them there. They thought it would only cause problems, disturbances.
Right.
And
well, you gotta remember that, like, why, I mean, Hitler says this even in Mein Kampf. He has plans as early as the mid-20s. He, at some point, is going to conquer Russia. At some point, Germany is going to invade. He hates the Soviets because he believes this idea of Judeo-Bolshevism, that this idea of communism and Judaism are intertwined, and that the Jews are the Bolshevists, and that they have this grand conspiracy to conquer the world. So Hitler hates Bolshevists and communists just as much as he hates Jews.
Yeah.
So a lot of these early foreign policy decisions by Hitler to kind of go against the Soviet Union are all done because he knows he's gonna fucking invade them, which he kind of goes against because then they signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact.
Right.
But we'll get into that.
Yeah. And one thing to add to your point there too was at this time the Great Purge was kind of on its last length.
Yep.
Kind of like the end of it, but still taking place. The Great Purge had just happened, and Russia, I mean, compared to Germany, did not look that great in the world. Right. I mean, probably more so than Germany did, you know? And so it makes complete sense that they were all like, hey, let's not include them.
Right.
Let's keep them out of this. And that also satisfied Germany, too, so a little bit more of that appeasement policy there. And so what came of the Munich Agreement?
So basically, Germany gets the Sudetenland. And Hitler says, I'm not going to go any further than the Sudetenland. I'm not going to take over the rest of Czechoslovakia. This is my last demand I want.
Bullshit.
It's complete bullshit. And Hitler takes the Sudetenland. But then, 5 months after the Munich Agreement, Hitler then annexes the rest of Czechoslovakia. And we were talking earlier about how Poland's basically now surrounded. So in the north, they have East Prussia. They can easily, the Germans, if they want to conquer Poland, which they will, spoiler alert, they can come from the north. If they want to conquer from the west, they have just the mainland German border. And if they want to conquer from the south, then they can go through Czechoslovakia. So they're now basically completely surrounded. And this is 5 months after the Munich Agreement. And then in March of... Do you have anything else you want to add about the Munich Agreement before I get into this?
No, I think you covered all the bases.
Okay, so in March of 1939, Poland, United Kingdom, this is... Well, actually, no. Let me back up.
Okay.
Let me back up. I had no idea this happened. So after the quote-unquote precedent had been set by Germany to take over parts of Czechoslovakia... Nice. You hitting your vape there, Hayden? After the precedent, this is how Poland viewed it. They said a precedent had been set by Germany to take over, different ethnic regions that belonged to them in Czechoslovakia. So now Poland seeks to set its own precedent. So they take over, I don't know how to pronounce this, Zauji in Czechoslovakia. It's a Polish-speaking region in Czechoslovakia, and they annex it. This is a fatal fucking mistake, mainly because England and France view this as an act of aggression. And it makes their relationships a lot shakier because now they view Poland as acting completely out of aggression because they didn't remember Poland's not a part of the Munich Agreement. They have the treaty that they signed with Hitler, and then Hitler spells out, "This is all I want. This is all I want. This is all I want. I swear to God." But they don't have that with Poland, so they don't have that assurance that they're not going to do anything nefarious.
Right.
So then they annex this part of Czechoslovakia, and then the Munich Agreement gets signed in 1938, later 1938, and then in 1939. So this is where I was going to go. In March of 1939, Poland, the United Kingdom, and France become military allies. But this military alliance is strictly about Nazi Germany. If Nazi Germany decides to go into Poland, then in theory at least, the United Kingdom and France will come to Poland's aid. This is not against the Soviet Union. And we'll see this because people ask, well, if France and United Kingdom declared war on Germany after they invaded Poland, why didn't they declare war on the Soviet Union once they entered Poland? It's because the treaty that they signed with Poland was strictly about Nazi Germany. Had nothing to do with the Soviet Union. So in March 1939, they become military allies. And then this is probably one of the most interesting things I discovered in my research for this. So then a few months afterwards, in August of 1939, German Foreign Minister Joachim von Ribbentrop, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce it correctly. Vyacheslav Molotov. They sign the German and Soviet non-aggression pact. And it's not an alliance.
Nope.
It is a mutual kind of way to say, well, we're not going to get in your way if you don't get in our way. Let's be cool here, even though we basically hate each other. But let's not get in each other's ways to conquer the world, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about this before we started recording the podcast. I always thought, for a lot of these treaties you hear about in history, that there's these big grand treaties that they go on for ages, right?
Sure.
But you can look up the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, and it's a page and a half. It's short as hell. It's easy to read. The language is not very difficult to understand. It's extremely, extremely short, and it's pretty basic for the first page. But then there's the remainder of the treaty was actually not published. It was kind of kept in secret. And part of what's kept in secret in the Ribbentrop Pact is the division of Eastern Europe. So once the Soviet Union conquer different parts of Eastern Europe, how they're going to divide it. Mm-hmm. And to quote the treaty itself, it says, "In the event of a territorial and political rearrangement of the areas belonging to the Polish state, the spheres of influence of Germany and the USSR shall be bounded approximately by the rivers of the Nerav, Vistula, and San." So already here, in a month before the invasion begins of Poland, you already have Germany and the Soviet Union already kind of linking hands and saying, "Okay, we're thinking about going to Poland."
9 days before.
Was it 9 days? Was it 9 days?
Found that great. He did not waste any time.
Wow.
And yeah, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact was really, really interesting. Signed August 23rd, 1939. And before this, though, and something that I'm sure you're aware of, but probably missed, was Soviet negotiations with Britain and France. Mm-hmm. Stalin was really, really trying to develop a peace with Britain and France.
Makes sense.
And, was not a fan of Germany, obviously. They were not friendly. And preceding this pact and preceding the breakdown of these negotiations was their original foreign minister, Litvinov, for Russia. And Litvinov was Jewish. And he was really on board with this treaty that was in the making with Britain and France. And he had drafted proposals and had given them to Stalin in preparation to see this thing through. And so, really, they were right on the cusp of creating this peace and immediately giving Germany no reason to start this, invasion of the rest of Europe, because then they would have basically been dealing with the same issues they had in early World War I, right, up until the Bolsheviks took over. And that was a two-front war. But what happens is Stalin changes his mind and fires Litvinov, hires Molotov, tells Molotov, create this peace, this pact with Germany. And it was more because he knew how powerful Germany was getting. He was worried.
Right.
And something that a lot of people forget about Stalin, is, terrible as you want to make him, he was always scared.
Right. He's an extremely paranoid. It's weird, because I like how you mentioned this, of like, he's a communist, Stalin is. Hitler's a fascist. They're on, in theory, completely opposite political spectrums, but they share so much alike.
Yeah.
Both of them are extremely paranoid individuals, which I guess is really just for all dictators in general. It seems like a current, like, just a common thread.
Understandable for Hitler, if you look at all the assassinations.
True.
I haven't looked into Stalin, but I'm sure there are some there.
Well, I think weren't some of the reasons for the purges of, like, the officer corps in the Soviet Union because he was just so scared of, like, a mutiny, basically?
Yep, political opponents. Yeah. And when, I learned this a while ago, but I thought this was interesting too, when Germany invaded Russia, Stalin was freaking out. And he completely expected his fellow political officers to rise up and kill him, because he was just so inactive during the beginning stages, because he was paranoid. He was scared. This was his worst nightmare. And the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, I think, really signifies that paranoia, because essentially what Stalin was saying was, we do not want to be left responsible with Germany in the East. In East Europe, we're the only significant country that really stands a chance.
Right.
Like, all these other nations will likely fall, and we're not even that friendly with them.
Right.
And so what do? They decide, okay, together we're going to conquer Eastern Europe, and we're going to split it down the middle. We're going to chunk off this half to me, this half to you, call it a day, be happy, not fight each other.
Right.
And that was exactly what Stalin wanted. Obviously, Hitler didn't want it.
Of course.
But Hitler was also not in a position to wage a war yet when he hadn't even taken Poland. And I think East Prussia was the only place on the German map that was anywhere near Russia at the time.
Which now belongs to present-day Russia, ironically.
Yeah.
And I think it's like Kaliningrad. Is that what it's called? It's modern day East Prussia, but now it belongs. It's like detached from mainland Russia,
Really?
and it's like smack dab in the middle of like the Baltics and Poland. Like it's basically now Russia. It's hilarious. It's weird that they can just completely flip flopped. But yeah, you were saying.
Oh, I mean that's just it. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, to me anyway, was just out of paranoia for Stalin anyway.
Right.
And I think it helped with Germany too because, I mean, it would have made the invasion of Poland so much easier because Russia was basically going to help out in the last leg and finish this war up. And I think what gets left out a lot, and you hear a lot of times people saying, Poland, France fell in a couple days, no big deal. I mean, not literally. And they really didn't stand a chance. But the saddest part of it all was they really did stand a chance to Germany at that time.
Right.
Germany was highly advanced technologically, and they had obviously the Blitzkrieg tactic, among other things. They had one of the best, well-trained air forces in the world at the time, arguably the best. They were just so ahead of their time, but in terms of numerical advantages and taking on all these different countries,
It's just too much at once.
exactly, and that's what it came to be towards the end of the war,
Right.
obviously. And we'll get into that another time, sure. But yeah, at this time, they knew Poland was not going to be a walk in the park.
Right.
But something I love that I found out when researching for this a little bit, I found that Hitler demanded that Poland be taken in under 6 weeks.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Really?
He demanded, take Poland in 6 weeks. And his generals all told him, no. This will probably take
a while.
3 months.
Right.
Yeah, they said upwards of 3 months, probably longer. And, that's just, I think that's a testament of how the Russians viewed the Poles at the time. Or the Germans, excuse me. The Germans viewed the Poles at the time. Because they were well aware this is not a one day, no problem, walk in the park, walk in with soldiers and say, hey, this is ours. They knew Poland was going to fight and they were going to resist. And it's really interesting how strong that resistance was. The fight that they did put up, it's often overlooked, which is kind of what I was saying earlier, like with France, right? France's resistance was, nothing.
They capitulated pretty quickly.
Nothing major, considering, because you have to think about World War I, right? How strong France was during that war.
The stereotype that France are just these, they quickly surrender, all that shit. That's so...
Nope.
Your Menards bag, Phil. Is so only about World War II, because they fight their ass off, and they lose almost I think about 2 million men in World War I. So this reputation they gain, sadly, in World War II of being the French, it's partially deserved. But I don't think the Poles are as deserving as the hate they get, because what do you expect? What can they do? They're surrounded on all sides, a 2-front invasion. They don't have the mechanisms yet to actually counteract this shit, especially against 2 global powers that are much more mobilized, much more mechanized than they are. It's just, you're not starting off at a good place, and we'll see exactly what turns out of Poland. It's terrible.
We should probably proceed with September 1st to the Soviet invasion.
I will start.
Okay.
So, August 25th. So 2 days after the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact is signed, Hitler declares that he wants to attack Poland on the 26th, so the next day. But he cancels at the last minute because he just now learned of Poland's alliance with Britain. So this is a gigantic deterrence for him, right? But this kind of goes into something I had no idea actually happened until I started researching it. So, at the buildup of the invasion of Poland, the Nazis didn't want just to walk into Poland and then create this diplomatic nightmare, basically. So they wanted basically to create a series of false flag attacks to make it seem like Poland was actually aggressing on Germany and not the other way around. So they called it Operation Himmler, after Heinrich Himmler. He was the head of the SS, the Schutzstaffel, and they basically created a series of false flag operations. They called them quote unquote border incidents, and they would have these incidents along the border, on the Polish border, to basically make it look like Germany was not aggressing and they were the ones being attacked.
Right.
So on the 22nd of August, a few days before Hitler declares when he wants to start the invasion, Hitler says to his generals, quote, "I will provide a propagandistic casus belli," which is Latin for occasion for war. He says, "Its credibility doesn't matter. The victor will not be asked whether he told the truth." So
He's got a point.
he does. So mainly these operations took place the night before the invasion, on the 31st of August. There were several attacks, quote unquote. Most of these raids had similar executions. SS soldiers would dress up in Polish military uniforms, and then they would raid German government offices on the border, or they would go into villages on the border to make it even worse. So remember, the Holocaust it started at this point. And they took many concentration camp victims, specifically from Sachsenhausen concentration camp, and they dressed those victims up in Polish uniforms too, and then they killed them, to make it look like there had been some actual fighting going on between the Germans and the Poles. And this happened specifically in the villages of Hochlinden and Pichven. But the most famous and most inciting incident of this Operation Himmler took place at Gleiwitz. And Gleiwitz was home to a large radio tower that was key to the region for kind of disseminating news and propaganda. And so on the night of the 31st, 7 SS men they barge into the station, dressed in Polish uniforms, and broadcast a message in Polish that says, "Attention, this is Gleiwitz. The broadcasting station is now in Polish hands," they say. And the day before, to kind of set this up, the Gestapo actually arrests a German farmer named Franzik Hocknig, and the next day, the SS men that stormed the radio station at Gleiwitz, they take the farmer that they arrested yesterday. They dress him in a Polish uniform. They kill him. They dump his body at the entrance of the radio station to appear as if someone had been killed. So it's all these things are just kind of they're exactly what they are. They're false flag operations to make it look like Poland is the one aggressing.
Right.
Now, does this work? Not really. At least now, in hindsight, it doesn't really work. We know now, obviously, that Germany's clearly aggressing.
Sure.
But this was what the Nazi high command wanted to do, and on the 1st of September at 4:45 a.m., Germany invades Poland with no declaration of war. This is known in German as Fall Weiß, means like case white or plan white.
Yep.
So let me just go into a little bit of just the armies themselves.
Okay.
So 53 German divisions, including 6 armored German divisions. About around 1.5 to 2 million men, German men are deployed. And Walter von Bachtisch is commander-in-chief. And this force of around 1.5 to 2 million men is divided into 3 army groups. So Feder von Boch leads Army Group North, comprising Georg von Kluckler's 3rd Army and Gunther von Kluge's 4th Army. And both of these armies, their objective is to head south towards Warsaw. Gerd von Rundstedt leads Army Group South, and this is the main bulk of the attack because it how do you say this word? Compromises? Comprise, that's it. It comprises Johannes Blachowicz' 8th Army, and that heads towards Poznan. Walter von Leichnau's 10th Army, going towards the Vistula River, and Wilhelm List's 14th Army, going straight towards Krakow. And then Heinz Guderian and Paul von Kleist lead the Panzer Corps. Heinz Guderian, by the way, is going to be a central figure in developing Blitzkrieg in the invasion of France. But we'll get to that later on. Anyway, then we have 1,600 aircraft that are led by Albert von Kesselring and Alexander Löhr. So this is what makes up the German military at the moment, and then when they enter Poland, and we'll see when we get to the Tsar offensive later on, 90% of German military forces are in Poland. The bulk of their army is in Poland. So that's just something to keep in mind when it comes to later campaigns that they engage in Western Europe. So that is the German army at the time of September 1st. So what do you have?
I think you covered all the bases, at least for the German army there.
Mm-hmm.
I can speak a bit about the Polish army.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, they were weak at the time of the invasion, but something interesting that I found out was that the Western Allies actually pressured Poland not to mobilize their full army. Yeah, and I think this was like another tactic of like appeasing and staying on the good side.
Right.
But at the time, the Polish army had roughly 1 million troops, or I'm sorry, 500,000.
And then, but they added additional 500,000, mobilized them. So it's about 1 million at the end of the campaign.
Yep. And something interesting I learned actually too was that they had over 2 million men in reserve.
Really? I did not know that.
Yeah, it might have been almost 2 million, but they had a ton of troops.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the same size as Germany's army had they had the time to mobilize.
Right.
But Poland really didn't expect an invasion from Germany. I mean, they really didn't see this coming, and if they had known it was going to take place when it did, because you kind of have this ambush invasion, if you will, that kind of just up and happens. And at the time, Poland was mostly an agricultural/industrial nation, give or take, and they were producing some of the best aircraft in the world at that time, but they were selling it all. Their own aircraft were outdated. They did not stand a chance against Germany's. They only had roughly 600 to 800 aircraft in total, and if I'm not mistaken, Germany mobilized over 2,000 for the entire invasion. And they had 210 tanks. They weren't prepared for what came, and if they had that time, they probably would have been much more prepared.
Right.
But from a German's perspective, right, that's kind of a good thing and the goal. Give Poland the time to prepare, and then here you are with this long battle that takes place instead of the 6 weeks or 3 months that you're that you're going for. But yeah, so the invasion begins in the early morning of September 1st. And essentially, the first attacks were really bombings from the German Air Force.
The Luftwaffe. How do you say it?
Luftwaffe.
There you go.
Yeah, my pronunciation on German is not that great.
I know.
German major.
Neither is mine, to be fair.
But the reason Poland was selling a lot of their good stuff, by the way, just wanted to note this, was because they were focusing on bringing in income and really building their
Poland,
economy.
like you said, is an agricultural nation. It's basically a buffer state between Germany, the Germanic lands in the west, and then the Slavic lands in the east of Europe. So it's got this really awful geographic location, which will play out horribly, obviously, in this campaign, and it's going to get way worse for the Poles when the Nazis really gear up the Holocaust. It's this terrible geographic location to be at. I just wanted to add that because it's just terrible. Terrible.
That's a good point. But I think the best place to start for the invasion of Poland is the Battle of Westerplatte. Get that right?
True. Yes, you did.
Yeah.
I don't even know where that's on the map. Let me Google this.
It was in the corridor closer to East Prussia, and this little section of land, actually, in the free city of Danzig, was kind of where the height of these tensions between Germany and Poland were located.
Right, and that's kind of, I wanted to mention this earlier, but I forgot. When we talk about like the Polish corridor and why Hitler kind of wants to build a bridge, so to speak, not like a literal bridge, but like
Right.
a political bridge, dare I say.
Yeah.
Why Poland doesn't want this is because the Polish corridor is Poland's only way to the sea.
Mm-hmm.
It's its only way to actually get any trade coming in. So with the Germans control it, they're completely landlocked.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, again, terrible geographic location. But yeah, please continue.
Oh, but you have to note that Poland's navy was far superior. 5 submarines.
I didn't even know how many. I think it had like, don't quote me on this, but I watched a video about it yesterday, and I think there was like I know this is a big jump, but it's like between 25 to 50 submarines the Germans have. I know that's a gigantic deficit, but like they had a lot more. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
It was grossly outnumbered, yes.
Okay. And that's a big part of this whole invasion, too, is numerical advantage. Because, like you said earlier, the whole idea of blitzkrieg wasn't really down, I guess, would be the best way to say it, or wasn't formulated as well until after this invasion, and they saw, hey, this works.
Right.
Combining all these forces.
With armored divisions.
Yeah, and pounding the shit out of our enemy into submission.
Right.
You know? And the interesting thing is they kind of learned that with Poland, right? And you do see a little bit of it, but it wasn't like a tactic that really, at the high command was, something
Because remember,
used.
Hitler wants to do it in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Generals want to do it in like 3 months. But when it happens in literally just 1 month, they're like, oh, well, I guess we can do this a lot faster than we thought we could. Yeah.
And another thing to note, like the campaign against France, in this one, the armored divisions did move at that pace. The issue was the infantry. They couldn't keep up, So while the armored divisions are conquering all these towns and making all this progress, high command is like, hey, wait for the infantry
Right.
to come and
It's
occupy it properly.
a very old view, outdated view of military like strategy. It's
Yeah, nowadays the last tank standing is
right.
no. But yeah, so Poland was very ill prepared for this, and the initial engagement took place on Westerplatte. And the reason I say initial or first battle engagement, right, I will probably use those interchangeably. But the reason I say that is, aside from the bombings and the Germans crossing the borders elsewhere and little skirmishes, if you will, this was kind of like the first battle, major organized battle between two opposing forces. I shoot you, you shoot me. And the bombing itself took place when simultaneously Army Group South and North were attacking across Poland's borders. But so yeah, this little peninsula on the Baltic Sea was highly debated between Poland and Germany for who historically owned it,
Right.
who historically occupied it. And interesting note, Poland has a very rich history that I had no clue about.
It goes back centuries before it even, because it originally was a nation.
It was a kingdom.
It was a kingdom, yeah, in like the 1700s, I believe. And then...
I think even further than that.
Really?
As a matter of
Okay.
fact, yeah.
But I knew it has a very rich, culturally...
It does.
Just insane.
Yeah, read about Poland.
That's the end of the story. Read about Poland.
Yeah, exactly. That if you don't learn anything,
Read about Poland.
yes. But yeah, so what happened was this pre-dreadnought ship sails into a harbor right next to this peninsula, and they unload 220 some troops, German Marines. And these will be the key ground forces attacking this place when the battle actually commences. But one thing I would like to note before that was Poland knew that this peninsula was important. Obviously, it was their gateway to the sea, like you said. It was on the corridor, and it was a defendable position. And what they had here was a naval and military depot.
This takes place over by Hell, doesn't it? Is that what it's called? Like the little peninsula? H-E-L, Hell?
I'm not sure. You'd have to check a map for that one.
Okay. Because I know that I one of the videos I watched, I know that there was a fortress at like Hell, basically. Like it's over by, you can overlook it when you're in Danzig. And I remember reading that Hitler actually watched the bombardment of the Hell like fortress basically every morning, like during breakfast, basically for a few days when he was in Danzig. Yeah, but
yeah,
please continue.
You're right. He did go there after the battle. But yeah, so this is a highly debated territory on who owns it. Both sides want it,
Right.
and it's a military depot. You have all these guns, ammunition, anything for the use of the military stocked up here, and you have 88 soldiers guarding this place, this peninsula, right? Which seems very, very low, and that's because it is. I mean, to America, that's a platoon.
Right.
To the American,
Very
army,
insufficient.
right? Yeah. So essentially, a platoon of men. If you're not American, then 88 soldiers. Take with that what you will.
Right.
And so Poland knew they had to stock up and defend this position any way they could. So what they did, and I found this very fun, was they would dress up laborers as soldiers, and they would leave the base, and then what they would do is after they'd leave, real soldiers would come back.
Really? That's
how they stocked up. Unfortunately, that stocking up was not a large number, and I think this the reason that is you have to consider someone's going to notice.
right.
And especially if tensions are high, there's reconnaissance work going on, aerial photographs, right? And they had good information on this position, obviously. A lot of Germans went to this place, right? Danzig, right? A lot of Germans went there. You got East Prussia, mainland to the west. So, I mean, it was a mixed area, if you will.
Very.
And but they would have been aware if they had stocked up with, let's say, 1,000 men, right? Someone would have noticed sooner or later, I'm assuming. But so back to the battle itself. So this pre-dreadnought ship, and what that means essentially is a battleship before dreadnoughts were beginning to be used. And don't take that for granted. This ship had guns up the
It was
wazoo.
massive, yeah.
Yeah, it had tons of guns. Was it old? Yes. Did it have errors? Yes. Did parts of it break down? 100%. But yeah, so they drop off these 225 German Marines, and then the ship pulls out, lines up horizontally with this depot, and begins firing at it at what is called the beginning of the war, right? No casualties were inflicted. Not a single one during this original bombardment. And then the Marines attack. What did the Marines find? Well, they found mines, barbed wire, artillery, and an ambush of heavily armed troops waiting for them. Yeah. So where they thought this was going to be a breeze,
It's not.
no, not at all. Much like Hitler with the whole invasion.
Right.
So and they really lost this first engagement. They attacked, they backed off, called for air support, asked for the ship to fire again. Ship bombards it again. No more deaths.
Right.
Nothing. I mean, still no deaths on the Polish side, and the Marines attack again. Same deal. They walked away with, I think it was somewhere around 200 wounded or killed on the German side. That's the majority of the men they sent in, and throughout this whole ordeal, and the Polish garrison there held it for 7 days. 7 days. While obviously the rest of the country is kind of
Capitulating.
Yeah, pulling back to this overwhelming force, and Germany is overwhelming this small little peninsula against a ragtag team of 200 men, call it the Alamo, and they're not backing down.
Right. We will learn this throughout the entire campaign, is that the Poles go hardcore.
Oh,
they are badasses
Yes.
against what is not only now one front invasion, but it's very quickly going to be a two-front invasion. Even though they capitulate pretty quickly, again in the span of a month, they are fucking badasses. They fight as hard as they can, as long as they can, with the materials they have, and it's a gigantic testament to, again, why, like, I don't know, we don't talk about the Poles very much in terms of like their military capability, but they fought extremely hard
throughout the whole war.
Throughout the whole war, Polish resistance is very big all throughout the war.
And I mean, call me on my bullshit if I'm wrong,
Please.
But where else do you see that kind of resistance? You know?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was just, it's crazy how many times they fought back, devastated the German army, rose up again. You know, it was like they were a nest of cockroaches.
You can maybe make a comparison to the French resistance, but again, France is so conveniently placed geographically. They could get a lot more help with, you know, Britain, America. Mm-hmm. Poland is deep into the Reich. Mm-hmm. It is deep into Eastern Europe, and the Western Allies, they don't really help them, even though they're bound by treaties, which we'll see later during the Tsar offensive. They're bound by treaties to help Poland. They don't really. Yeah.
Well, I mean, and the sad part about France too was, as much as they resisted, nothing really came for them.
Right.
Like you said, there were some leaders that came of it. Matter of fact, the leader of, I want to say, the Fourth Republic of France, which is the current republic.
Yep.
Was dropped in on parachute in France during the resistance. The president right after the war.
Yeah. I think de Gaulle was...
De Gaulle. Yeah.
That was him?
I'm pretty sure it was him. Again, don't quote me. We'll get into France. And there will be extensive research.
Oh, yes. The France episode will be quite the episode.
Probably some recanting. But the leader of this little garrison had PTSD. He'd fought in...
The Great War.
Actually, I think 3 wars.
Really?
Yeah. Had huge, really bad PTSD. The Luftwaffe did come back and bomb them after the German soldiers backed off. They destroyed their food storage, and they were struggling, and their defenses were very slowly. I want to say, 7 days for 200 troops against this massive force of Germans.
You're not lasting long.
Yeah, and what I think is also really overlooked about this battle, or if it's not, it needs to be noted, is they're getting hit by the sea, the air, and land.
Surrounded.
All 3. You know? Inland, you can't do that. You know, sea especially, where you have these ships with all these mounted massive guns firing at you.
Right.
Right? While you're trying to defend this tiny position. And I think it was on like the 5th day, 4th or 5th day. The commander, who was dealing with PTSD, right, and they were all hungry because their food storage had been destroyed by aerial bombings. He sat his officers down and said, "Listen, we are in a terrible position. We cannot hold it. We will lose. Like, there's no question about that. Reinforcements are likely not coming. There's no reason for them to come.
It's hopeless."
Yeah, exactly. He was basically telling them how it is. They're in a hopeless position. And he asked them, "Do we surrender?" And you know what all the officers said? Nope. We're going to keep fighting.
Again, just complete badasses.
And it's a testament to Poland's willpower, Polish
tenacity
willpower.
too, just complete tenacity.
Exactly. And so they continued to fight, and eventually they surrendered. And when the German commander of the battle came up to accept the saber, right, which was still being done at this time, he didn't accept it. He said, "No, I don't want it. I respect you too much."
Right.
Because he did.
Right.
What they did was incredible. A week of this, and they held out. But anyway, so as you said before, Poland was kind of dealing with attacks from all sides, and you do see a lot of these pocket resistance battles throughout the invasion itself, notably Warsaw. There were a couple in the corridor and along the Western Front, obviously. But, what do you do in the Polish command, right? How do you defend this?
Right.
At this point, right, Soviet Union is not involved. You're dealing with this massive German army. They're attacking from the north. They're attacking from the northwest. They're attacking from the southwest.
Right, every direction.
Yeah, and they're all converging on Warsaw, your capital. So how do you defend that? You know, what do you do?
I do want to briefly mention part of Polish strategy during the campaign.
Yeah,
so
perfect time.
So the Polish Armed Forces commander is Edward Rust-Śmigły, and his best forces are concentrated in the west, mainly in the corridor region and in Poznan. Now this means, because they're so concentrated in the west, that if the reserves and reinforcements don't come, he risks getting overrun by the Germans, which are obviously mainly in the west.
Right.
So he develops this plan. It's called Plan West, basically. And it was developed in response to the invasion, basically for Poland's defense, because they knew that they were not going to win the defensive battle against Germany. They knew this was not going to happen. So the plan was to gradually slow them down and halt them until the UK and France would invade Germany, which they do. Should we get into the Tsar offensive now?
I mean,
because this then kind of leads into the Soviets getting involved.
I think now would be the time for that. But I just do want to compliment your point.
Please.
Yeah, it was all about slowing them down. They didn't stand a chance. They knew it. They fought like hell,
right?
Obviously.
Yeah. Truly.
And they knew that if the UK and Britain jumped on this war and immediately turned it into a two-front war for Germany, that Germany would have to redirect a large portion of its army. I think it was you who said that 90%?
90% of German forces are in Poland.
Yeah. I mean, that's... What do you do when you get attacked from the west? You know? You're screwed, right?
What do you do when you're leading 33-0 in the first quarter, in the first half, and then, you know... What do you do? What do you do when you're in Minneapolis?
I don't know. You don't lose.
Yeah.
But somehow you do.
By like 3 points. So for those listening, today is the day that Matt Ryan's Colts lost to the fucking Vikings in a insane... Literally, they go from the first half 33-0. The Colts are just raw dogging. Crushing them.
Yeah.
And then the Vikings climb their way back. What do you do? Well, what do you do? Well, France invades the Tsar region of Germany. That's what you fucking do. They outnumber the Germans 5-1. The Tsar region is like the industrial part of the industrial heart of Germany.
Just south of Belgium.
It's pretty small region. But 40 divisions, French divisions invade Germany, while again 90% of German forces are in Poland. They're concentrated in Poland. Yep. Now, the French use 400 tanks, highly mobilized. And at this point in the war, the French are making some of the best tanks in the world.
Right.
Their armor is thicker than the German tanks, and the Wehrmacht, the German armed forces, they don't have the weapons capable of destroying French tanks. But the German army is led by Erwin von Lützelben. He has 13 divisions to his name, and they're going to try to counteract this French invasion of the Tsar. But France basically kind of encounters almost no resistance. So in some villages they walk in, because it literally is that. It's just they're kind of just strolling around the German countryside. Some of these enemy positions are completely empty. They're just abandoned.
Right.
And by the 12th of September, 5 days after the offensive has been launched, France is now 5 miles within the Third Reich. Now, it seems to me, and this might be me just kind of reading into it a little too much, but it seems to me like the French, because remember, the French invade Germany because they're bound by treaty to do this. They're bound by treaty to come to the aid of Poland if Nazi Germany attacks.
Right.
But it seems to me that like the French didn't really have not necessarily a lot of hope in the operation in terms that it wouldn't work. It was more just like, we don't actually care about what this operation does. We just kind of want to uphold our end of the bargain just to say we did. Because the French, one of the French generals who commands the army that's going into the Tsar, he says, quote, "It was but a little test." So the Tsar offensive is literally just a little test to see, what's capable of the Germans, what's capable of the French. And with the Soviets invading on the 17th, it was just a matter of time before the resources were diverted away from, helping the lost cause of Poland. So basically by the 16th, France has kind of stopped making progress into the Reich, into Germany. And by the 21st, French General Gemelin orders his soldiers to retreat back to France. And it's a great idea. What do you do? But it's just a completely lost cause.
About 6 years worth of thinking over that one.
But yeah, notice how I said the Soviets invaded on the 17th, so this is a great segue into the invasion from the Soviet perspective.
Real quick before that.
Go ahead.
I do want to talk about Battle of Bizera. If I'm mispronouncing that, my bad. Spelled Bzura.
Very Polish.
Yes, very. It was the largest counterattack made by the Polish army during this invasion. And I think it's worth noting, it took place between September 9th and the 19th. So, but I mean, the initial engagement led by Poland took place between the 9th and the 13th. And it was highly successful in the beginning. Poland was obviously outnumbered. Their armies attacking. At this time, and pretty much throughout the entire invasion, Germany, since the beginning, was bombing Warsaw. That was obviously the goal of all these armies too.
Right.
And they had a lot of troops right at the western side of Warsaw, ready to take it. And Poland kind of mounts this... I interpret it as kind of a last-ditch effort of buying time, because that's what the whole defense strategy was. We're buying time until our allies come and save us. Spoiler alert, they don't. And yeah, it was initially successful. They hit the Germans hard. It was the bloodiest battle of the Poland invasion. You see roughly 30,000 soldiers dead. Yeah, or close to that. But this is both sides combined. But that's still a ton of soldiers.
Right.
For a 10-day engagement, 10 days.
Nuts.
Yeah, 3,000 a day. And again, if that's not another testament, said it before, we'll say it.
The Germans don't even lose that in the entire invasion. So.
And yeah, Poland really is not worth being looked over, especially for this and. Westerplatte and other engagements leading to this, and of course the resistance. And like I said, initially successful. Germans mount a counter to their counter, if you will, and eventually these armies capitulate, retreat into Warsaw, and the west part of Warsaw is officially taken. And from there, begins, or kind of segues into the siege of Warsaw. The official siege, when you have mobile troops on the ground surrounding Warsaw, and the siege that lasts 20 days, technically. 20 days. If you consider the bombings part of it, and of course these armored groups attacking from the west as well. But yeah, it's really sad what happened with Poland and how they kind of got screwed out by their allies.
Truly, they really did.
They signed this treaty with the hopes of securing a fallback. They know tensions are rough on both sides. And on September 17th, the Soviet Union attacks Poland. And you can speak a little bit more about that, I'm sure. But, and at this point, Polish high command is... They know
they're calling it a day.
Yeah. There's nothing they can do. They issue a full evacuation. They're ready to get out and not lay down, but leave. Come back to fight another day. And if anyone listening knows anything about wars, a two-front war is not the way to go.
It's like the easiest way to lose very quickly.
You think about Hannibal. He designed that idea.
The Roman...
Hannibal Barca, Carthaginian, we will get into current.
Okay. Leave it to Hayden. It won't be a Hayden conversation if we're not. He doesn't mention a Roman general at some time.
Love Rome. Such a rich history. How do you know history without knowing Rome?
I don't know, man. I managed to do it. Anyway, is that all you wanted to say about the Warsaw siege?
They just they evacuate to
Romania. Yeah, most of the Polish high command evacuates to Romania.
Mm-hmm. But sadly, still 140,000, give or take, Polish troops are taken prisoner.
Yes. So that segues into September 17th. This is when the Soviets launched their formal invasion of eastern Poland, and Hitler's generals have no fucking clue. Because I was kind of wondering this, like, so was this invasion planned, with the both of them in mind? Like, what's happening? So it wasn't. But again, you kind of have a bit of what's to come with the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, because it's in secrecy. There are parts of the agreement where they kind of partition off parts of Eastern Europe.
Yep.
So it's not all a shock. It's not a surprise. But Hitler's generals are surprised in terms of when they did.
It was secret.
It was secret.
Yeah, and word only got out by mistake.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing that's also left out all too often is this pact was completely secret. Just between the high command of both countries.
No one outside knew.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's just because the rest of the world would have had a field day with this information. I mean, you talk about the Saar offensive, right? I mean, how would that have changed if they had formal knowledge of this alliance?
Right.
I mean, Britain and France were completely willing to entertain this idea of a pact with Russia. Mm-hmm. It is debated that Britain might not have taken it seriously whatsoever. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, if anyone had learned anything from World War I, it's good to have, a friend in the East. Mm-hmm. But...
so on the day of the invasion, on the 17th, Soviet Foreign Minister Molotov claimed, quote, the Polish government has ceased to exist, so Soviet troops have occupied eastern Poland to protect Russian citizens in western Belarusia and western Ukraine. This is what the foreign minister says. Mm-hmm. So a little bit about the armies that go into eastern Poland on the Soviet side. 35 divisions, 14 tank brigades, 800,000 men. And it's quick as shit. Mm-hmm.
Quicker than the Germans.
True.
But they weren't prepared for it, so.
That's true. While the Soviets are invading on the 20th of September, Hitler goes to Danzig. And there he kind of makes a speech addressing his new policy of killing disabled people in Germany.
Wow.
When this invasion by the Soviets is happening.
Jeez.
So anyway, back to the Soviets. In just a few days, having only 4,000 casualties, the Soviets have taken 200,000 square kilometers of land.
Wow.
So on the 25th, actually, I did have some stuff about the siege of Warsaw, because this happens right when the Soviets invade.
Yep.
On the 25th, Black Monday in Warsaw begins. 1,200 aircraft attack the city. The Warsaw Waterworks is bombed, and firemen can't put it out, so now they have to resort to sand to put out fire. There was, a saying I read where, there was, at any given moment, there's 500 fires burning in Warsaw. Warsaw falls on the 28th, and on the same day, Russia and Germany sign a treaty partitioning Poland, because now they basically have conquered it.
Yep.
And the polls last really until late September, but officially till the 6th of August.
October.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I meant. Sorry. Yeah, began September 1st, lasted till the 6th of August. Yes.
October.
No, never mind. Whatever. Germany takes 700 POWs, and the Soviets take 200,000. The Poles suffer 70,000 killed in action.
Wow.
And 130,000 wounded. The Germans have 10,000 dead and 30,000 wounded. On the 6th of October,
there you go.
right when they right when the fighting in Poland has basically ceased, Hitler makes a speech at the Reichstag trying to calm down England and France by saying he's not interested in war with them. He just corrected the unjust Versailles Treaty, which is rich, coming from the guy who just annexed Czechoslovakia after he signed the Munich Agreement with them, saying, I'm not interested in any more Czechoslovakia, I'm not interested in anything else. So it's rich coming from him. On the 6th of October, the same day as Hitler's speech, the Battle of Kock marks the complete capitulation of the Poles. Yep. Kock spelled K-O-C-K. Germany and the USSR now have a complete control of Poland, despite Poland never issuing a formal surrender, which goes to show again like their tenacity.
Yeah, the last act of defiance.
Truly.
I mean, really. But yeah, I mean, don't overlook Poland.
Never overlook Poland.
Seriously.
They fight their asses off against the Third Reich. They fight their asses off against the USSR, and they last about as long as probably anyone else would.
Oh, yeah.
I seriously doubt...
Given the circumstances,
I seriously doubt America would have lasted any longer. I seriously doubt Britain lasting any longer if they were in that position, in terms of their geographic location with all the resources they had. But I think Poland really did probably the best they could.
Yeah.
They mobilized fairly quickly in terms of, ranking up an additional 500,000 men to come to the country's aid. It's really just, again, the invasion of Poland is not a story... I mean, it is a story about, German aggression, but it's also a story of Polish tenacity. And it's a story of them kicking it to the man and, showing Hitler who's really got both balls. You know what I mean? So,
yeah. A couple things I would like to note that I think, we just breezed over a little bit with the excitement, me definitely. But the Polish cavalry was very, very interesting. Mm-hmm. Poland had a cavalry.
It's true.
It was huge. And 1939, you'd think, well, isn't that just a tad outdated? Mm-hmm. But the interesting thing about their cavalry, and just to correct the misconception, in case anyone out there still believes it, they did not directly combat tanks.
Complete match.
I'm sure there were a few examples of maybe.
It was not an overall strategy.
But no, it was not a strategy whatsoever. And what the Polish cavalry would do is on horseback, you're extremely mobile. You think of a horse compared to a tank, think about the turns you can make. It's like taking a 90s Porsche against this giant hunk of metal, right? And but that's an example with the tanks. But what they would do is they would ride into areas where Germans were, the enemy. Specifically infantry was actually the strategy, and they would dismount and attack German soldiers, which I found really fascinating. They used the cavalry in probably the best way you could use cavalry at that time. It wasn't, what, screw it, we're not going to use them. Mm-hmm. They realized, hey, these have mobility, unlike our feet. Horses are fast, strong animals. And they're highly mobile. So we don't have the mobile forces to match Germany in terms of armored, right? In terms of armored vehicles, but we do have a cavalry. So let's use them to the best of our advantage.
Let's do as much damage as we can with the resources we have.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that kind of ingenuity is it's inspiring,
Truly. Yeah. Do you have anything else you want to say about the invasion of Poland? That's all I have in terms of my notes.
No, I think that about covers it. For those out there listening, though, I do want to say, Stalingrad. There will 100% be a Stalingrad episode.
Oh, 100%. There's got to be. We got to have.
I will convince Avery with every resource available.
No convincing. I completely agree.
No, Stalingrad is by far my favorite battle.
Mm-hmm.
Not again, but just to reiterate that statement.
Mm-hmm.
No, death is not fun. It's not a good thing. War is tragic. It's sad.
But it's fun to learn about.
Exactly. It's fun to learn about. It's fun to decrypt.
Truly.
What happened.
Yeah.
And I think Stalingrad is one of those battles that...
It's such a shit show.
Yeah. and it could be pulled apart in so many different ways.
Oh, yeah.
Not a step back, an infamous order that came at the right time. About time, Stalin.
Yeah.
And I think, but the reason I also bring that up is because I really think it mirrors what Poland did.
It's really a story of tenacity.
Yeah.
And just sticking it to the man, and showing Hitler who's boss. In that case, it would be Stalin, but
Poland was in such a terrible position through a long list of factors. We covered a lot of those bases, but they're told not to mobilize their military, their reserves, right? They're getting attacked from all different angles. Russia on the 17th, and you're kind of put into this impossible position, but yeah, they held out.
Truly.
And they continued to resist for the rest of the war and until they became a nation again.
Yeah. So that just about does it. Again, if you take anything from this podcast, the Poles are badass. I respect the hell out of the Poles.
Do not overlook them.
Truly. I don't know what we'll cover next. I would imagine something in the aftermath of the Polish invasion. Probably, I don't know, Hitler's next invasion, which I think is, what, Belgium? No, it's probably Denmark. I think it's Denmark.
I thought it was Belgium.
I don't know. I don't remember.
We'll figure it out.
Take
notes.
Yeah, but this is our first episode of the Kings of Indy, which again is a name that will most likely change, but that's the working title.
Workshopping it.
We are workshopping it. Yeah, so we are signing off here at 8:02, December 17th on Saturday. So yeah,
The day the Colts lost.
The day the Colts lost. The day the music died. But yeah, thank you for listening, Hayden. Thank you for your diligent research on the invasion of Poland.
Thank you. Thank you, Avery, for your wealth of knowledge.
Of course.
Research.
All right. Yeah, signing off. See you guys.
See you later.